Well, welcome, Dr. Paul Clayton, and thank you so much for joining us today. I truly appreciate your time and effort for joining us here in Australia. In fact, this is pipelining all the way around the world, and the gathering of the followers of drpaulclayton.eu has simply been unbelievable to watch what you've been able to achieve with us, okay, here at Zenzino, utilizing your science, your technology of, just all your history that you've got. Dr. Paul, what I'd like to do is I want to just get you to give me a quick 1 minute snapshot of just the history over the last, and let's just say the last 10 or 15 years of what you've been doing and how the balanced oil came into your life.
Well, if I go back over the last decade or so, in that time, I've worked for governments, for industry. I've researched and published in the academic literature. I wear a lot of different hats. Got to do something to make life interesting. And at one point, I developed an autoimmune disease. This is actually a little more than 10 years ago, which is called Graves' disease, after a period of intense stress in my life. And I was told by the medics that I could look forward to having my thyroid removed and then becoming life dependent for the rest of my life on thyroid replacement hormone. And I wasn't crazy about that idea. So I already knew a certain amount about autoimmune disease. I knew that when something like this occurs, it's your immune system that's latching onto a target in your body and destroying it over time through a process of chronic inflammation. And so I started dosing myself with a kind of precursor of balance oil, drinking fish oil and olive oil in large amounts, which I don't recommend. And after a while, what I noticed was the symptoms of my disease were getting less. And I thought that if I could maintain this kind of very specific, very selective form of immunosuppression for long enough, that maybe my immune system would forget its target, because it shouldn't really have picked on my thyroid as a target in the first place. So for about 6 months, I kept my immune system at bay while maintaining my immune system using other tricks. And then gradually stepped back, started reducing the dose, and found not to my complete surprise, but I was relieved to find that my immune system had forgotten its target. And so the disease did not progress. I don't require thyroid replacement hormone. I no longer have Graves' disease. And my doctors, who were looking after me at the time, said, well, we have heard of spontaneous remission. It's we've never seen it. It's astonishing. It's astonishingly rare. Whatever you've done, congratulations. And then I heard that there was this little company in Norway that was producing something they called Oil for Life. And they contacted me. Just really, it was a coincidence. When I realized what they were doing, I thought, okay, this is interesting. I'll go and help them and work with them and advise them. And after a couple of years or so, along came Zenzino, who at that time were a coffee company. They realized that Oil for Life had this interesting product and a blood test, which is really important. And they decided to buy Oil for Life. I realized what they were doing. And once they had done that, they realized that I was part of the office furniture, that I came along as part of the deal. And they called me into their office one day. And we sat down, Oriane, Doug, and myself. And they said, well, look, you're involved with us now. How do you feel about that? I said, well, you guys seem okay. What are your plans? And they said, well, we think we'd like to start to develop this balance oil concept. And I said, okay, but I'm not really interested in doing just that. I think we could do more than that. I think that if you utilize my pharmaconutritional background and where I think nutrition should go, you could become a life science company. I mean, I don't see us competing with Herbalife and other minor companies like that. I mean, we all know there's lots of companies in that sector who produce lots of products, most of which simply have don't work at all. And I don't much like the supplement industry. There's a lot of junk. So I wanted to become a life science company, and I suggested we could do this. And they said, sure, if you're up for it, we are too. And the story goes, and this is really how it happened. They said, well, let's talk about a brief. And I said, well, what do you think my brief should be? And they just said, well, do your best, which was amazing to me because I've worked for lots of companies in the food sector, the pharmaceutical sector, the supplement sector. I've never had a brief like that before. And I thought maybe we can really do something here. And I started working with Balance Oil, but I knew back then that we needed to broaden our portfolio because Balance Oil does a lot of good things really well. And the test is important because we can monitor what we're doing for the first time. But the modern diet doesn't just cause chronic inflammation. It causes dysbiosis. It causes type B malnutrition. It causes immunological senescence and failure. And what I felt we should do right from the start is to produce a very small portfolio of products which would address each one of those issues. So we have Balance Oil, which is very good at damping chronic inflammation in most tissues of the body, but it doesn't reach, has very little effect on the microbiome and what happens in the large bowel. And that's a really important thing because we know that dysbiosis is a very significant driver of problems not only in the large bowel but elsewhere. So we know that the WHO metadata shows us that dysbiosis is associated with a 30% increase in early mortality, and we can't address that with Balance Oil. So I developed Xenobiotic to address that. And then this type B malnutrition, which is very almost universal now because of the way in which we live. I designed Extend to address that. And it's when you put those three things together that you have what we call the health protocol. When you do that, you are rectifying all of the most substantial problems that are caused by our modern lifestyle. And what we see when we put people onto that program is that a lot of the symptoms of chronic degenerative disease start to go into remission. They start to fade over time. Many of them disappear. And many of our clients, patients, customers, call them what you will, eventually manage to become drug-free. What has emerged from this is a new idea about what chronic degenerative disease actually is. It's clearly not entropic. It's nothing to do with wear and tear. That's just a hoary old myth that no clinical scientist believes in anymore. The human body is amazingly able to repair, regenerate, and to heal. What we're doing is to provide an environment in the body which will allow those processes of healing to come to the fore and dominate over the processes of decay and destruction, which are, in most cases, due to chronic intoxication caused by the modern diet. So it's we're rethinking. I think some of the most basic concept about what non-communicable disease is, and this is beginning to look like the beginning of a new era in healthcare. We're moving on from the old pharmaceutical model, which is very good at acute medicine, very good at treating the symptoms of disease, but has done absolutely nothing to prevent the increase in chronic degenerative disease that is overwhelming healthcare systems all over the world. We know that the only way to address that is to remedy the nutritional and therefore metabolic problems caused by the modern diet and lifestyle. And that's where we are. That's what Zenzino does. Sorry, long answer to a short question. Sorry about that, Rob.
Absolutely spot on, my friend. Absolutely spot on. And look, all the listeners around the world can appreciate where you're coming from because it's right to the heart. It's exactly how it happened. And it's your passion, what's driving the next generation of the products that we've got. So Dr. Paul, can we just flip back to the test first up? Because most people that are attracted to our company or connected to the company, they normally get the test, the Zenzino or the Balance test as part of the first process. Can you just talk to me for a few minutes about why that is so important for the person that's about to consume the products, okay, or become a partner or become a customer of the company, why that Zenzino Balance test is so critical?
I think it starts to bring a little bit of law and order into the wild west of the supplement industry. Now, the supplement industry is a terrible business because what it actually consists of is companies selling products that they clearly don't understand. You only have to look at most of the formulations in the stores, and most of them online as well, and you can see that these people have no idea what they're doing. They're not selling products that are particularly helpful or useful. In fact, they can't be, and they're being purchased by consumers who don't, for the most part, know what they're buying. How can they? You can't ask all the consumers to become experts in nutrition, physiology, metabolomics, and all the rest of it. So it's a strange old industry, people selling stuff they don't know to people buying stuff who equally don't know what's going on. Rob, you've disappeared. Are you still there?
I'm here, my friend.
Yeah. And so the dried blood spot test brings a little bit of sanity into this nonsense. Why on earth would any company want to sell you products that you don't really need? I mean, take the fish oil industry. It's worth billions of dollars a year, and yet we know that fish oil doesn't work. The Cochrane collaboration, and for once I agree with them, looked at all of the clinical trials that have been done with fish oil and said basically it's a washout. Fish oil does not protect against cardiovascular disease. It does not protect against dementia. It doesn't really protect against anything, and yet people buy that stuff. Why? Because of faith, I suppose. And fish oil is really modern snake oil. That's all it is. It has a talismanic value, an anxiety binding value, but nothing else. And I don't want to be in that business. I don't want to sell products to people who don't need them. I don't want to medicalize people who don't need to be medicalized. So the dried blood spot test starts to bring this out into the light of day for the first time. Now, the modern diet creates all these other problems. It's not just chronic inflammation, it's dysbiosis, it's malnutrition, it's immune dysfunction, but there's no single test for all of those things. We can't test for all of that. It's really, really complex. You need a lot of different tests. But where we can start is by looking at your cell membrane lipid profile, because if that's bad, it's a pretty fair bet that everything else is in the wrong place as well. So for the first time, we can do a very simple test, which is run by an independent third-party validated laboratory, nothing to do with us. Yeah. And that test will then tell you, where are you on the spectrum? Do you actually have a good 6-to-3 ratio? And some people do. People who eat a really healthy diet will tend to have that. In which case, congratulations, you're doing everything right. You don't need us. Go on your way. don't waste your time and your money with us. But if you have come back with a bad result, you will have chronic inflammation, and it is very, very likely that you will also have, if you're eating a diet that got you there, you will also almost certainly have dysbiosis, type B malnutrition, and all the rest. So this is not a comprehensive test, but it's a bit like taking a dipstick, putting it into a car engine and saying, wow, your oil level is so low that you're clearly causing progressive damage. And you almost certainly, therefore, have a whole range of other problems as well. So the blood test is very important. Now, I'll only just say that I want to be able to test everything else as well. And we are developing a test which will demonstrate very quickly and easily. It's a home test, a bit like the blood spot test, whether you have dysbiosis or not. If you don't have dysbiosis, you don't need xenobiotic. Great. We don't want to sell you stuff you don't need. But if you do have dysbiosis, at that point, it makes great sense to take a time-released blend of prebiotic fibers, which is what xenobiotic is, rectify the dysbiosis, and you will experience immediately, and this is a very quick turnaround, not unlike balance oil, which takes a while, but with the xenobiotic, you'll notice the difference probably within 48 hours. This is another interesting aspect of pharmaconutrition. If you get your pharmaconutritional interventions right, in many cases, you will notice the effects very, very quickly. So with xenobiotic, you'll notice the effects within a day or two. With Viva, you'll notice the effects probably within the hour. We're now developing products which are so potent that they are, some of them, active within the kind of short time frame you would associate with pharmaceutical products.
And I think, Paul, when you start looking at actually the blend of those products, okay, and that was a great answer for the balance test, okay? And just so you know, we've just hit over 500,000 people tested in the last number of years. So from our side, it's very exciting. Now we become one of the largest database holders of omega testings in the world in an independent laboratory situation.
Right. One quick answer to Lilius Mera. Can xenobiotic and Protect be used for people during pregnancy? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it's a good thing for people who are pregnant. Yep.
Yeah, xenobiotics, guys. Once we get it here in Australia, and for those people listening outside in the bigger world in Europe, okay, you have to get yourself on xenobiotics. The results from it is outstanding. It's an incredible formulation. Okay, so Dr. Paul, let's talk about my favorite. Okay, and something that I've become very, very passionate about, and that's the balanced oil. Talk to me about the structure of this product. Okay, and where you see it working with some of the mainstream issues that people have got out there.
Look, it's great that you're passionate about it, Rob, and I am too, but passion isn't everything. As a scientist, I've got to tell you, logic comes first. And balanced oil is an entirely logical product. We know that fish oil doesn't work. And I've spoken to the people who run the big fish oil companies. I've been around for a long, long time, and had conversations with them, sort of off the record, and say, well, look, this product you're selling doesn't work, but why do you go on selling it? They say, well, it's good, it's great business. that's the long and the short of it. I mean, it's a confidence trick, and yet we know that eating fish is actually associated with good health, and eating the kinds of fish you find in the colder oceans, the oily fish, is really good for your health. And that goes all the way back to the Danish physiologists who did the first work in the Greenlanders and found that they had this relative freedom from degenerative disease, and they reckoned it's got to be due to their diet, and they identified oily fish, although actually the Greenlanders mostly eat marine mammals, not oily fish. And they said, well, it's got to be the omega-3s. And the reason why they said it's got to be the omega-3s was, well, there's a lot of omega-3s in that type of food, but also these two physiologists had a pharmaceutical kind of a background. And that pharmaceutical model says it's one thing that does, that has the effect. That's how pharmaceutical trials and testing are done, and that's what the pharmaceutical mindset says. It's a magic bullet. And so basically these people pulled out the omega-3s, and they were half right, but they were completely wrong, because the omega-3s are a part of it, but what actually was protecting the Greenlanders was this binary weapon. It was a combination of the omega-3s and the polyphenols, very special polyphenols, lipid-soluble phenols called fluorotannins. And these are terribly important because they are nature's chaperones for omega-3s, which are very fragile molecules. Now, where do the omega-3s come from? They don't come from the oily fish. Fish don't make omega-3s. It's the marine cold water plants, the seaweeds, that produce the omega-3s. How do they get into the Inuit? Well, they pass from the marine plants or algae into the krill, the small pelagic fish, the larger fish, the marine mammals, the Inuits. And that is a process, that is a journey that these fragile omega-3s have to go through, which can take up to 12 months, if not more, through 3, 4, or 5 trophic levels in the marine food chain. And when I started to think about this, I mean, it was just a mystery. How could these long chain omega-3s survive that journey? Because they're so fragile. If you take an ordinary fish oil capsule and you prick it and open and pour the contents into the palm of your hand, in 30 seconds, you'll notice that it's starting to oxidize. It goes rancid very, very quickly, because vitamin E is not the right chaperone. That's what the industry still uses. It's the polyphenols that bind on to the omega-3s and transport them safely all the way through the marine ecosystem until they end up in the body of the Inuits, the apex predator. And those polyphenols work in the same way when we eat omega-3. They'll chaperone the omega-3s through the dangerous environments of the stomach, the small intestine, the portal circulation, the liver, and the general circulation before they finally arrive at where they need to be in the peripheral tissues and then built into the cell membranes. The polyphenols, the fat-soluble polyphenols, are the only molecules that can do this. That's what was designed by nature to do the job. And the polyphenols are really interesting, very hot topic in clinical science at the moment, because they not only act as these ideal chaperones, taking the omega-3s to where they need to be, but once they deliver them, they then have a secondary role, which is they act as another anti-inflammatory compound downstream from the omega-3s, and you get this super additive, synergistic anti-inflammatory effect. So the polyphenols and the omega-3s, that's the killer combination. And we see that in our cell membrane library too, because we get to take blood samples from people who've been taking fish oil supplements for decades, and we see they have terrible 6:3 ratios. You see that vitamin E fish oil combination that they took, it didn't deliver. The vitamin E, in many conditions, becomes a pro-oxidant. It actually chews up the omega-3s before they can get to the peripheral tissues. So that's really not the way to go. What we see again from our library is when you take the omega-3 polyphenol combination, which is in balance oil, the omega-3s do get to the peripheral tissues. They are built into the cell membranes, and they are done. This happens very consistently, very reliably, and in a time frame that is no more than 120 days. And that is a huge problem right there, because a lot of people have been taught by the medical model, if you have a problem, take an aspirin, take whatever this is, it'll fix your problem. It'll take the symptoms away quickly. We can't do that. What we see is a really unhealthy population that's being poisoned by the multinational food companies, by the processed and ultra-processed foods that we consume today. And that poisoning takes place over decades. It's a slow process. That degeneration, that deterioration of cell membrane structures caused by the modern diet develops over time. And when we remedy it, which we can do with balance oil, that is also a slow process. We can't really speed it up because there's a rate limiting step here, which is the rate of turnover of the phosphatidyl phospholipids in your cell membranes. We can't accelerate that. So taking balance oil, we're trying to take an oil tanker, turn it around, and it's a little slow to respond. 4 months to get to below 5:1. Many people will start to see improvements before that, especially if they're starting off from a really bad ratio. So yeah, it's a step on from fish oil. It's fish oil plus plus plus. It's fish oil working as nature designed it to work. And when I first published my paper about this, I have to say the fish oil industry really hated me for it. I would go to meetings and conferences, and they would literally scream at me and say, I mean, it made my life very difficult for a while. And I can understand why. I was questioning their business model, a very successful business model, even if it wasn't a particularly successful product. But what's happening now is I see more and more that the companies are starting to copy us. Imitation, the most sincere form of flattery. So they're starting to do the same things that we're doing. But the good news is we're keeping a couple of steps ahead of them. We've got the vegan oil, we've got the Aqua X, which is pre-emulsified. And we have some other variants of balance oil, which should be coming on stream over the next 12 to 18 months.
Fantastic. And Dr. Paul, can I just ask about dosages? Okay, now there's a lot of things about, and there's a lot of questions about pregnant women. Okay, number one. Number two, if you have a chronic disease, and let's just call it diabetes, ADHD, all these man-made diseases that are out there, if you up the dosages, does that help, or is it better just to stick with the normal weight and measure dosage?
I would suggest that no matter where you're starting from, no matter what condition you're trying to modify, just stick with the mils per kilogram body weight recommended dose, because you can't speed up the change by increasing the dose. The rate limiting step is what's happening in the cell membranes, and that is something that we cannot affect. So stick to the dose. Do another test in 4 months' time, see if that's been enough to get you to where you need to be. In most people, it will be. In some people, it won't be. In some people, there may be a problem with absorbing the omega-3s. And if you have biliary insufficiency, then you can't emulsify the oil. You need to be using the Aqua X. If you have exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, not so common, but it does occur, then you will need to combine the balance oil with an exogenous lipase. And there are various products available on the market. Some people, even if they don't have a problem with their gallbladder, liver, or pancreas, still don't seem to absorb the omega-3s very well. And oddly enough, we find that in this group, by taking xenobiotic, by changing the microbiome, you can suddenly flip them into being good absorbers. Now, nobody knows quite why this is. I've written about this in one of my posts. I've got some ideas, but we haven't proven that yet. It's all a little bit hypothetical.
And Dr. Paul, just with that, with the absorption, okay, and those people, I've really found everybody that has those type of issues, I just flick them straight onto Aqua X, and they have great results. I really see amazing results.
Well, just to point out, Rob, Aqua X will solve the problem if you have biliary insufficiency, but it won't resolve exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, because there the body isn't secreting or producing enough of the lipase enzymes, which you need. So in that situation, I would recommend using a lipase, which is taking that enzyme exogenously, or you're getting it in a supplement form, swallowing that at pretty much the same time that you take the balance oil, and that replaces the missing pancreatic function.
Fantastic. Now, just on the xenobiotics, okay, and the protect, okay, for pregnant women, and again, I like to keep away from this subject, but there has been a question about it. Just talk to me in general, okay, about why xenobiotic is such an outstanding product in your opinion.
Well, gut health is obviously it's a problematic area, and we've seen enormous increases in the numbers of people presenting with IBS and IBD. And one of the factors underlying that clearly is the modern diet, because IBS and IBD are vanishingly rare in vestigial populations, and they used to be extremely uncommon if you go back 150 years and look at the mid-Victorian period. In fact, they practically didn't exist. And so this link between diet and gut health is being hammered out. There's a lot of evidence that indicates that it is due to a lack of prebiotic fiber in the gut. And we know that a lack of prebiotic fiber in the gut, and particularly prebiotic fiber, is associated with a dramatic increase in early, which means preventable death, from cancers of various sorts, from vascular diseases, all kinds of things like that. So the modern diet, particularly that very large part of it, which is ultra processed, and over there in Oz, you're consuming about 50% of your calories in these ultra processed foods. These foods are very, very low in prebiotic fiber. And if you don't eat the right kinds of fiber, then the gram-positive microbes, the probiotic species that live in your gut, they start starving. They wither away, and they're replaced by gram-negative species, not all of which are bad, but all of which are coated in lipopolysaccharide, and that creates chronic inflammation in the large bowel, and then your problems start. You can try and rectify that by taking a probiotic, and there's a big industry to supply probiotics. The only little catch is they don't work. It's a bit like the fish oil industry, because when you're eating a yogurt or taking a capsule of probiotic species, you're taking lab-grown microbes, soft living, untrained, basically, and you're throwing a very small number of them proportionately into basically the urban warfare of your large bowel, because that's colonized with far, far larger numbers of very aggressive species which have adapted to the environment and know how to fight their corner. So we know that the probiotics have very little impact, and the day you stop taking them is the day they disappear from the gut. What we do is we send in the fibers, which are the supplies that the few probiotics still living inside you, clinging on for dear life. They say, thank heavens, here come the supplies. You're giving them the fuel that they need to multiply, to grow, and to start to displace and kill off the gram-negative species. Now, the gram-negative species are by and large very pro-inflammatory. As the probiotic species start to multiply, they break the fiber down into compounds including butyrate, and butyrate is highly anti-inflammatory. So by taking these prebiotic fibers, you're switching the microbiome from being pro-inflammatory to being anti-inflammatory. Now, you've got to be very careful about your prebiotic fibers, because they come in different lengths, they have different fermentation rates, they therefore work in different parts of the large bowel. And there was for a while a vogue for using fructooligosaccharides, which pretty much past fairly quickly, because you can't use large doses of FOS. It creates all kinds of problems. And in fact, we now know that it burns out so quickly, it's fermented so quickly, that you start increasing the probiotic species, but the FOS runs out. All these probiotic bacteria are there, but they no longer have any of the right fuel. They start using they switch to different types of fuels, and then they start producing compounds which are not good for you at all. So you need to have a blend of fibers which will support the multiplication and growth of these good bacteria all the way through their transit in the large bowel. So I worked on this for a long time, and it's a combination of 4 or 5 different prebiotic fibers, very small amounts of the very short fibers. So that starts the process. It's like the touch paper on a firework. But then as they burn up, they are replaced by the longer and therefore slower fibers. And as they are used up, they in turn are replaced by larger amounts of the even longer and even slower fibers. So it's like a relay race. The fastest runner starts first. There's a very small amount of that, a larger amount of the next one, a larger amount of the next one. And the largest component is resistant starch, which you get from sources like green banana. And if you were to use just that, the fermentation wouldn't start until you were probably 2/3 of the way through the bowel. So you can't use it on its own. But it's very, very valuable because it continues the process all the way through to the end of the large bowel. And that is, of course, the area which is most vulnerable. So in this way, we change the microbiome throughout the entire length of the colon. And when people do that, what they notice is that the symptoms of IBS and then IBD start to fade away.
And tell me, Paul, is there an age group that, and I'm going to just pick an age here, okay? Let's say if you're 4 and above, what age group would you recommend that xenobiotics could be used by?
Well, I mean, there is no age limit. You see, we used to eat a diet before the industrialization of the food chain. We used to eat a diet which contained significant amounts of these prebiotic fibers anyway. I mean, your best food sources of these types of prebiotic fiber are pulses, peas, beans, lentils, foods like that. And we used to eat lots of these kinds of foods. So it's not as if we're introducing something new into the diet that we've never come across before. These are foods we always used to eat. We're just restoring normality. We're putting back into the diet what the food industry took out. The fact that the food industry has taken so much out of our diet is the reason why the chronic degenerative diseases have become so much more common and why we see them occurring in younger and younger age groups. I mean, the food industries are now killing more people than the tobacco industry. Yeah. So all we're doing, we're not putting anything new into the diet. We're simply putting back with our products into the diet what always used to be there and what needs to be there.
And I was quite fascinated when I was listening to you on a national radio show the other day here in Australia, with a couple of million followers, and they were fascinated that you said, if you want to lose some weight, just go to your cupboard and start removing all the omega-6 products that are in there. That's how you can lose weight. Your fridge is the problem.
Well, I think what I actually said, Rob, was that you should.
I knew you'd have the right words.
You should be cutting down on your intake of ultra-processed foods, because these ultra-processed foods tend to be very light on nutrients and very heavy on the calories. And they also tend to be very high in omega-6s. You're right there. But I'm not saying specifically throw out all the omega-6 foods, but cut down on the ultra-processed foods.
Fantastic. Hey, and 4 key things. I was talking to another scientist the other day, and literally he's talking about there's 4 key things that we're addressing as a company. Is number 1, okay, the carb industry. We want to attack that head on. The ratio of 6:3, which we know we are without a problem. There is a major issue with lack of vitamin D3 in your diet right now, and the metabolic syndrome that's out there. So those 4 key things is the next generation of where we're addressing our products, and that we will be certainly attacking with science.
Okay, there's a lot of points there. Let me respond to some of them. Vitamin D3, yeah, that 1 or 2 food sources of vitamin D, but it's not really a vitamin because we can make it in our own bodies, and the key, of course, is sunlight. Now, I know that in Australia, you've been subject to a lot of government campaigning telling you to, what is it, slip, slap, slop, or whatever the hell
That's
it is,
it.
stay out of the sun. And, I think a lot of that is misguided. And a lot of it started from some work that was done in Scotland by a very well-known dermatologist, Rona McKee, who I respect. And she was seeing a lot of skin cancer in her patients. And she said, well, it's all down to the fact that they're now taking foreign holidays and they're being exposed to sun, and it's all due to the sun. The problem is that she was dealing with the Scottish population and the Celtic configuration, the skin pattern and color, ginger hair, lots of freckles, don't tan. Those people do get into trouble with sunlight. And it now turns out that when you have that configuration, you have a high spontaneous risk of skin cancer anyway, whether you're exposed to sun or not. So I think she drew some of the wrong conclusions. A very easy mistake to make, and I don't blame her for that at all. But that then became a kind of a moral panic. The governments picked it up and made a complete hash of it, as governments always do. And your government is really bad in this respect, not that ours is much better. And so people became afraid of sunlight. Well, there is some logic to that, but think about it in an evolutionary sense. We were designed, I don't mean in the sense of intelligence design, we evolved as being animals that hunted, gathered. We weren't designed to live indoors. We were designed to be able to deal with sunlight. And if you're eating a diet which contains lots of phytonutrients, such as polyphenols, such as carotenoids, xanthophylls, tocopherols, tocotrienols, guess what? They migrate into the skin, they actually color the skin a little bit, and they protect you from UV-induced damage. Sunlight has become more dangerous to us now because our diet is so depleted. Our skin defenses have been degraded by the ultra-processed diet, as so many other elements in our physiology and our defense systems have been. So sunlight has become more hazardous to us than it used to be. We're simply not as well defended against it, but eat the right diet. And what we've tried to do is to replace all these nutrients in some of our products. Then your skin becomes better able to defend itself from UV. And at that point, you can start to make more D3 in your own skin effectively and safely. So that's an answer to one of your questions.
Thank you. That's great.
Well, you talked about diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Yeah, we know that's a big issue as well. But that isn't so much something that can be treated with supplements. It is really, it doesn't make sense to take a chromium supplement or vitamin B6 or inositol. I know that those are all interesting, but they're not really the problem. The problem is we're eating a diet which contains far too much digestible carbohydrate. You're pouring glucose into the bloodstream. At the same time, we're physically very inactive. And so our muscles aren't soaking up that glucose. Therefore, it piles up in the bloodstream. Eventually, the insulin gives up and you move towards metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. And at that point, your long-term health is definitely compromised. The really logical response to that is to cut down on your carbs, go to a keto diet, in fact, and take more physical exercise. So you're reducing the amount of glucose being poured into the bloodstream. You're improving the body's ability to take that glucose, whatever there is, out of the bloodstream and use it to fuel muscular movement. And at that point, both metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes go into reverse. So that answer there is not so much a supplement, it's a lifestyle change.
Outstanding, Dr. Paul. Look, as we close out, we know that there's 3 key functions that we look after. That's the brain, heart, and the immune system. As a 1-minute closeout or thereabouts, okay, just talk to me about the immune situation, utilizing our products, utilizing the test, and where you see the best track for the next, let's say, 6 months, 12 months as we come out of this current pandemic that we're in.
How much time are you going to give me for it, Rob? I mean, these questions seem very simple, but they're actually very complex.
Let's give it a couple of minutes. I know that people are certainly asking, what can we do now to boost our immune system as a protection?
Well, first of all, I think that the data that's now beginning to emerge, that now that the dust is settling, we've seen enough of COVID-19 to get a better idea of what actually it is. Probably the majority of people who get the virus don't even know they have it. There's no symptoms. Of the remaining group, those who have symptoms, in most cases, it's self-resolving. The numbers of people who go towards the cytokine storm and require intensive support are proportionately very, very small. And mortality seems to be focused almost exclusively on those people who are old and have serious comorbidity. I think that the entire lockdown policy has been completely cockeyed. It's been really destructive. Instead of trying to protect everybody, we should have been protecting those people who were the most vulnerable. If we had done that, we wouldn't have had to lock down society. We wouldn't have to take the enormous, staggering economic hit that the world has taken. Once again, the politicians screwed up. They got it completely wrong. And they've inflicted more damage on our economy, on our health than COVID did. The numbers of people who put off medical treatment because they were scared to go into hospital, the numbers of people who committed suicide, who got into addiction, overdose, all those sorts of, the numbers of deaths caused by government policy exceed the numbers of deaths that are caused by COVID-19. What could we have done? I think what we should have done is to improve herd immunity. And if the governments had had an ounce of common sense, which I doubt, and if they had had any informed scientific input, which clearly they didn't, what we should have done would have been to make some very minimal changes to the national diet. One of the things we could have done, for example, is to include 1,3-1,6 beta-glucans back into the food chain. Now, they always used to be there. Another one of those really interesting and important compounds that has been removed by the multinational food industry. Without 1,3-1,6 beta-glucans, your innate immune system is cut off at the knees. It means that you as an individual and that community that you live in are more vulnerable at a herd level to almost any pathogen that might come along from outside, whether it's a bacteria or a virus. So we have all kinds of problems. We've created a kind of a death culture. We've created a situation where we have really large numbers of people who are sick. They have chronic degenerative disease, most of which is caused by the modern diet. Then we have the pharmaceutical industry, which comes in, gives us these toxic products, which we can use to treat the symptoms of chronic degenerative disease and keep people alive for longer, but with disability, with reduced degrees of freedom. The same food industry damages our immune system. So we have large numbers, disproportionately large numbers of elderly people with comorbidity and reduced immune function. This is a death culture. We're extremely vulnerable at the herd, the population level, to new pathogens. Now, COVID-19 was initially being talked about as being the end of the world. It seemed to be killing everybody. We now know that that was complete overreaction. And it was actually, if it was a biological weapon, it's just not a very good one. It's very ineffective. But at a certain point, disease X, which is what the World Health Organization, that was their nightmare vision of the future that they came up with 6 or 7 years ago. This idea was, at some point, a zoonotic infection, probably viral, would enter into the human population, which had not only high transmission rates, but also it was also be highly virulent. And they called that the disease X. That was the basis of the movie The Andromeda Strain. There's been a few more movies on this subject. COVID-19 isn't that. But I think what it shows us is that we have created a world full of people who are so unhealthy, whose immune systems have been so damaged, that if something serious jumps into the human population, we're going to be incredibly vulnerable. And at that point, that is going to be an end of the world situation as we know it, because we're so unprepared. The pharmaceutical industry is always struggling to catch up, trying to make vaccines. And a lot of these vaccines simply don't work, and they're too damn toxic anyway. I'm not saying all vaccines are bad. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Some vaccines, I think, are valid and effective, and they have a good therapeutic ratio, but others, such as the flu vaccines, are a complete waste of time and cause more damage than good. And I don't think the pharmaceutical approach is going to protect us at all. I think it's completely wrong-footed and wrong-headed. But if we can take these very simple nutritional steps to improve people's health and immunity at the herd level, at that point, we all become safer individually and communally.
Outstanding, Dr. Paul. Thank you so much for that and unbelievable information. Guys, let's get up to drpaulclayton.eu. That's the best blog to get up there. There's a lot of unbelievable information that Dr. Paul has up there for us. There's also his books, okay? And for those people in Australia, please, if you need one of these books, please get onto myself, email or call customer support, and we'll make sure you find a location to purchase one of these books. They're the two books that we have in Australia. Dr. Paul, can you quickly talk about, for 1 minute, your new book, which I will get into Australia very soon, but can you talk to me about that new book? It's an incredible read, I've been told.
Surely. Before anyone goes to the blog, let me just stick a quick health warning on it. I didn't write that to make friends. There's something there to offend everyone. Okay, so go there. You're taking a risk. The new book is all about supporting the immune system, and it was written actually before COVID-19. It's just a coincidence that it should be happening at the same time. And it talks about the innate immune system and how you can support it. And there are many, many different things that you can do, which I think go far and beyond the scope of any medical textbook or anything that's been written so far. There's a lot of new clinical science, new research that feeds into this. And I'm not saying that if you do all these things, you become completely bulletproof. But what I can say is this. I picked up COVID myself, COVID-19. I had been researching a lot about the innate immune system, and I wanted to know whether these things that I'd been writing about were not only theoretically relevant, but also did they actually work? So when COVID-19 came along, I suspected, well, look, given that I'm doing all these things, my immune system is probably in pretty good shape. And I was going through airports. I was being in a lot of very crowded situations. I didn't wear a mask. I didn't wash my hands. And I thought, I'm going to get COVID-19 and see for myself how it works out. I picked up the virus in due course, fairly quickly. Mm-hmm. And I was ill for, I don't know, maybe 10 days. I had a sore throat. I just felt a bit low energy. But, you know, it was no big deal. Rob, I've had worse hangovers. Although not ones that lasted for 10 days. It wasn't that bad. And looking back now, I think, you know, I think that my theories were borne out. I mean, I'm in a high-risk group, considering my age. I mean, I'm 70. So I should have been hit pretty hard. Correct. But the symptoms were there. There was this thing at the back of the throat, little bit of a fever, not much. But it never got to the point where my deeper immune system, my adaptive immune system, and the cytokine storm were remotely at risk of being triggered. My innate immune system was so strong that basically it did the job for me, fought the virus off, end of story. Now, that's not science. That's just a single case history. And I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody. I can't. I don't have enough data. But I will say it worked for me. In my case, the results seemed to bear out the theory. Now, I think it's pretty dangerous saying things like that because I know that a lot of medics are going to jump all over me. But I've written about this in my blog. I've talked about the rationale and how I think the innate immune system can be assisted and enhanced and why I believe it should work. I have actually introduced some of these concepts to the American government, and they have comprehensively ignored me. But my ideas are out there, and they are. I'm waiting for people to attack them and to refute them. So far, that hasn't happened.
All right, fantastic, Dr. Paul. And again, I just thank you so much. You know, you've done an incredible job here tonight to share a lot of information. Guys, please get up to drpaulclayton.eu. Have a look through the blog. Incredible amount of information. Get hold of the books. Get hold of the science that's online. Please go up to zenzino.com, also zenzinotest.com. Look at the facts. Look at the proof that is there, and just start on the products, and obviously get tested is your number one priority that you've got right now. Dr. Paul, thank you so much again. Look forward to having you back again, and it's just always great to have a 30-minute chat with you. Is just like having 3 to 4 hours chat with a person that's talking about something that they're highly passionate about, and you're just a wealth of information, and we thank you for getting up and being part of our call today here in Zenzino. Thank you so
Can
much,
I-
Dr. Paul. Yes,
Rob, could I just answer a question that someone has asked in the chat box?
by all means.
Karina at Higher Health and Healing asked, are beta-glucans problematic in autoimmune disease as an immune stimulant of innate immunity? Karina, the answer is no. Basically, the beta-glucans are functioning primarily on the innate immune system, not exclusively, but mostly, and the innate immune system is not involved in autoimmune disease. So that's the theoretical part. The beta-glucans do have some effect on the adaptive immune system, but we have seen a lot of people with autoimmune disease, including myself, with RA, with Graves, with Hashimoto's, SLE, type 1 diabetes. We've seen these people using 1316 beta-glucans, and there's no issues whatsoever. Now, I'll just quickly say, in a previous life, I chaired one of the scientific advisory boards for Biothera, which was the key player in the 1316 beta-glucan industry, and the tests were done with these 1316 beta-glucans in a xenograft model or an allograft model, and it had no impact whatsoever. So in situations where there may be a problem involving the adaptive immune system, the beta-glucans do not seem to exacerbate the situation at all.
Fantastic, Dr. Paul. Any other questions on there that you'd like to quickly answer as we tune out?
Yes, somebody asked about Parkinsonism.
Yes.
And I don't think that balance oil is a treatment for Parkinsonism, but I will discuss one case history. Here in the United States, there's someone I know, a relative of a friend who had Parkinson's, and he must be about 80 by now. And he was diagnosed with Parkinsonism, had all the characteristic, all the hallmark symptoms. And I suggested that he try not just balance oil, but also xenobiotic, because there's a very important gut-brain connection there, and extend as well, because that also contains anti-inflammatory compounds. After a year on this, he went back to his neurologist, and the neurologist scanned him and measured him and said, look, we think we might have made the wrong diagnosis. You do not appear to have Parkinson's. And they then said, look, we're just going to do a few more tests, and they all came up negative as well. And they finally said, actually, we've got you. You do have Parkinsonism, and we can tell that from your handwriting. And his handwriting had become rather small, but he didn't have the tremor anymore. And all of the rest of the symptomology of this condition had disappeared. Is that a cure? I have no idea. But what I did was I put him on a program which was designed to rectify as many of the issues that I could identify that are driving the disease state. And in his case, it was associated with a remarkable remission of symptoms. Again, there's logic to this. Some of this is discussed in the blog, and I'm fully aware of the fact that it's extremely dangerous in the current regulatory climate for me to say this is a treatment for a disease. I'm not sure if it is. It seemed to result in an enormous degree of improvement, and in fact, a significant degree of reversal of those symptoms. Does he still have the disease? Yep, I'm pretty certain he does. Has he been stabilized for the moment? Yeah. Is that going to continue? I cannot say. This is not science. This is just treating an individual patient, and I'm reporting to you at this moment what the results are, and that's all that I can say.
And Paul, if I go to, for an example, arthritis and ADHD, I mean, and obviously autoimmune diseases, though. So take those three as a group. You know, it's again what you just said. It's the results that we're seeing. That's individual results, okay? And you know what it is. Well, we just see the differences in people. Your comments on those three: arthritis, ADHD, and autoimmune systems.
We can't say that we can cure anything. We can't say that we can cure any disease state, because the law says you can only say this if you have a pharmaceutical product, which is nonsense, because the pharmaceutical products, as we know, don't cure a damn thing, except with the exception of the antibiotics. They simply treat symptoms. But if we were to go about claiming that we can cure these diseases, we'd be shut down pretty damned quickly by the regulators. Now, that is a sign of how ridiculously out of step the regulatory system is. They're living in the past. They have no idea of the significance and the potency of pharmaconutritional intervention. Eventually, they'll probably redraft the legislation to take this new science into account. But we're still dealing with a completely obsolete regulatory system, even if we have no respect for it, even if we know that it doesn't work, even if we know that it basically functions to protect the interests of the pharmaceutical company. The law is the law, and we have to abide by it. So we don't talk about cures. However, we do see a lot of people doing extraordinarily well on pharmaconutritional intervention. You know, the first there's one case, then half a dozen, and then we see 50, then 100 cases. And as a scientist, what I would say to you, none of this proves anything. These are just case histories. But there's a lot of smoke there. And where there's smoke, where there's that much smoke, I'm pretty certain that there's some fire going on there too. But in order to prove that, we need to do prospective randomized clinical studies designed in a robust fashion that I can bring my clinical colleagues on board with. That is where the proof will be generated. And I can tell you that that is the direction that Zinzino is now going in.
Look, and that's what we know with the future of the company, the direction as you're taking it. And, you know, it's again, watching and seeing all these different cases and the amount of people coming up to us and talking to us, you know, online and also offline is, you know, it's outstanding. People writing their own reports on Facebooks and social media. Guys, that's the only way to get the word out. Tell your own story. Don't try to convince other people about it. Tell your own story. And other people will resonate with that and go, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to try it. That's how I see it, Dr. Paul.
And that's why we have so many doctors working with us now. I mean, we're in, I think, 24, 25 countries. And in each of those countries, we have rapidly increasing numbers of doctors who are working with us, which I'm delighted by, because these are my colleagues. These are the people that I need to talk to and maintain links with. What happens is that the doctors see a patient of theirs who they've been treating for a long time, who they know, who are basically on that downhill slope. And the patient then comes back 6 months later and says to the doc, hey, I don't need the drugs anymore. The doc says, oh my God, what do you think you're doing? And they investigate the patient and find that the pathology that they had, which necessitated the pharmaceutical intervention in the first place, has either disappeared or is considerably better. And the doc thinks, if they're open-minded enough, well, there must be something going on here. Then the doc sees a second patient, and maybe a third. And then they think, oh, there really is something here. Maybe I should try it myself. No, hold on. I've got a loopy old aunt who far out on the fringes of the family. I don't care about her that much. Let's dose her up. And they or an uncle or whatever, and then they see for themselves someone that they know getting better. And then they start using the products themselves. And doctors get sick too. They're living the modern lifestyle, eating the modern ultra-processed toxic diet. They have health problems. Then they notice themselves getting better. And at that point, they become convinced. And at that point, many of them become really passionate advocates for what we're doing. I think that doctors have terrible training. They're taught that it's all about pharmaceuticals. That's all they really learn. Once they get the bit between their teeth and realize that what we have are products they can use to have a major impact on their patients and really turn their health around, that's what they want to do. That's why most doctors go into medicine in the first place. And then they get really interested. And some of our most powerful advocates now are inside the medical profession.
And that's what I'm seeing, okay, with the wellness professionals coming on board, and especially here in Australia, guys. You know, people, they're getting in, they're testing, they're using the products, starting to see the results. There's literally so many coming on board now, Paul. When you come down to Australia next, you will be blown away with the quality of wellness professionals that are joining us and seeing what you're doing and waiting for that next generation of Xenobiotics, Extend, Protect, and Viva to get that here in Australia as well. Those guys that have got it already in Europe, guys, you don't know how lucky you are to have the full range of products available, sitting there in your hands that everybody can consume.
Well, I met some really great top-notch professionals the last time I toured in Oz, and I'm looking forward to catching up with some of them. And if we have new people coming along and joining them, welcome. I'm so glad you're joining us, and I look forward to meeting you as well.
Dr. Paul, again, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go smuggle back into your beautiful bride and give her a hug from us from Australia, and in fact, all the way around the world. Give her a massive hug for allowing you to get up and spend 1 hour with us and share some most invaluable information that's available online today. Dr. Paul,
Right.
thank you so much. We look forward. Don't forget drpaulclayton.eu. Please get up to the blog and check it out. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
It's a pleasure. Bye
Thank
for
you,
now.
guys. Take care.